It's being described as the legal profession's MeToo moment. Tonight, we reveal the scale of misogyny at the bar as a leading parliamentarian condemns a culture of impunity at the top.
I think all three of us had this sense that he had to be stopped.
It's quite disgraceful that this was an open secret and there was nothing done about it.
Joe Sidu was one of the most senior lawyers in Britain.
This must come to an end, and it will.
Taking a high-profile role during the barristers' strike as chair of the Criminal Bar Association and former chair of the Society of Asian Lawyers. He was in the running to be the country's top prosecutor. Until earlier this year, he was disbarred for sexual misconduct after 3 young women complained about his behaviour. One of the women, who we're calling Sienna, told us Sidu first started messaging her on LinkedIn before offering her a week's shadowing him during a murder trial. On the first night, he invited her to work on the case in his room.
He invited me around about 7 p.m. and we worked on arguments for about 3 hours, and then at about 10 p.m. I asked to leave. He was trying to persuade me to stay. I kept on saying that I wanted to leave the room. The door was locked. It wasn't barred, but it was locked. And I was very aware that he was in charge of me on this week. At some point, the lights had turned off and I ended up on the bed. And then after, again, saying I would go to sleep, there was some touching and kissing. I lay on my back. He came on top of me and kissed me. And there was undressing.
She says she felt under pressure to touch his private parts.
This was a man 28 years your senior. I mean, just describe the power dynamic there and how much pressure you felt you were under.
Extreme pressure. As I said, I was a work experience student. I was at the start of my career wanting to enter the profession. The power dynamic is huge, and he holds so much weight within the legal profession because of how high up he is. He could destroy your career.
The tribunal upheld her complaint but dismissed allegations from 2 other women, although it judged all 3 to be honest and straightforward. Joe Sidu's conduct sits at the heart of a review into harassment and bullying commissioned by the Bar Council and written by Labour peer Baroness Harriet Harman. We've obtained a draft of Baroness Harman's review which describes Joe Sidu's behaviour as predatory. It says it was an open secret at the bar, with senior barristers warning junior women to stay away from him.
How would you describe what he did?
In my opinion, it's like grooming, because he preys on young women who are entering the profession, who want a career in law, a career at the bar. He builds trust with them, offers them mentorship, offers to help them in their career.
Annika Jens met Sidu at a networking summer party hosted by the Society of Asian Lawyers. They swapped numbers, and a few days later she sent him her CV.
I wanted to seem as professional as possible, and I worded a text message, much like I would an email. Dear Mr. Sidu, sincerely.
She says Sidu replied at 11:45 at night, and the tone quickly changed.
He said, well, you live a very exciting life, at which point I made a joke in agreement that I didn't live an exciting life and that I wasn't like the young kids listening to grime and twerking. And it was at that point he messaged me back and said, I'd love to see you twerk.
The Harman report says Sidu exhibited a pattern of behaviour. We were told that he was notorious for having young women working with him who were, shockingly, known as Sidu's bitches.
In the Harriet Harman report says that there was a sort of phrase, Sidu's bitches. What did you make of that when you read that?
Disgusting. It makes me feel sick. Again, that the bar as a collective had known about this secret, that people would joke about it, that people are complicit in his behaviour.
The women decided to lodge official complaints, but it was a huge challenge. The Harman report identifies significant failings by the regulator, the Bar Standards Board, which took 2 years and 3 months considering the complaints about Joe Sidu before a tribunal decided to disbar him.
From start to finish, I thought that it was appalling. The process has been traumatic on top of an already traumatic event. For some reason, processes were changing day by day, timetables were changing, there was massive delays, poor communication from the investigating solicitors that were sort of tasked with investigating this.
Sienna came close to withdrawing from the process.
Well, I mean, we were essentially silenced. We couldn't speak to anyone. We were asked to give undertakings not to speak to anyone. I was just a backseat driver. We had no standing. We were simply witnesses. We weren't kept in the loop as to what was happening.
The third woman to make a complaint was just 19 when she first met Sidu. He was in his early 50s. They started messaging on LinkedIn, and he asked her to send him sexually explicit videos and messages. How would you characterise what he was doing, really?
I would say predatory. I would say visibly I saw he was older than me, but I guess over message it was kind of hard to grasp the kind of contrast of life experience, and it's taken, you know, kind of years passing to really understand the gravity and kind of how much he knew and how much I didn't know.
Ella says she complained about him to several senior members of the bar, but to no avail.
I really kind of thought that if I told someone, and someone who was senior, that they would be in a position to pass it on, act as an in-between between me and the regulator, because I was genuinely terrified of him. I felt like, in a way, they actively resented me for giving them this information. I don't think they appreciated how intimidating the prospect of going to a barrister's regulator about a barrister would be, especially for an outsider.
In a statement, Joe Sidu's lawyer told us he would be appealing the tribunal judgment. He added that Sidu had not had sight of Baroness Harman's review, and the suggestion that his behaviour was predatory was something the tribunal carefully considered and rejected, and also expressed concern about such descriptions being made. He added if the Harman report reached such a conclusion, it would contradict previous tribunal findings. The report says Joe Sidu's behaviour is by no means an isolated case. One woman disclosed that an older male barrister offered to pay for her bar course in exchange for sex. Another female junior said a male barrister put his hand under her dress and into her tights 3 times while at a social event with colleagues.
We know of other victims out there who are afraid to come forward, which of course is why I'm willing to do this interview, because I want people to know, and potential victims, not just of him, but anyone, the fear is not ours, the shame isn't ours, and they can come forward in safety.
Barrister Charlotte Proudman has made a name for herself speaking out against misogyny at the bar.
More women than not will have experienced some form of sexual harassment and sexism at the bar. It's seen as something that we just have to get on with. And if you dare speak out against it, you will be the one who's silenced and you'll be the one who suffers the career consequences, not the male perpetrators.
The Bar Standards Board said it takes allegations of sexual harassment seriously. It added, "We understand that timeliness is important, but we must deal fairly and patiently with barristers' various challenges to the process." They went on to say, "We are actively exploring the ways in which we can engage specialist victim support services to provide further help to those who experience bullying and harassment," and accepted that a change in culture at the bar is needed.
I really thought the bar was this perfect place and you know, that I would never be good enough for the bar. And since engaging in these proceedings, I now feel that the bar and the profession isn't good enough for me.
The women want change.
hopefully this will be a moment of reckoning for the profession. And I think there needs to be a very serious moment of introspection.
Business, the media, Parliament and the police all have faced a moment of truth about the way they treat women. Young female barristers hope our revelations tonight will be a catalyst for change in the law too.
And if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in that report, you can find a range of places to seek help on channel4.com/support. Well, earlier I spoke to Baroness Harriet Harman, who authored the review into misogyny and harassment at the bar that we mentioned in our report, and I asked about her reaction to the experiences described by the women we spoke to.
Well, I think to be sexually harassed by a man in a position of power when you're trying to enter the legal profession is absolutely horrific. But I'm full of admiration that they've actually come forward to make a complaint and to tell their story, because that took a lot of courage. And to go through a drawn-out system and be challenged, I think was incredibly public-spirited of them, because without they'd have done that, he would have still been able to prey on other young women.
What struck you most about their testimony when you heard it?
Well, they're sometimes described as vulnerable, but they're young women who want to have a career at the bar. That shouldn't be a vulnerability unless there is something profoundly wrong with the system, that being young and being a woman and wanting to have a profession at the bar somehow makes you vulnerable to being preyed on by an older man at the bar. You know, it's not that they're vulnerable, it's that the system is faulty if it lets that happen.
He was not an isolated case. So what is going wrong with the system? How widespread is misogyny at the bar today?
Well, I think what there is a culture of impunity. And there is great jeopardy on anybody who's subjected to whether it's bullying, harassment or sexual harassment, that if they complain, it will be the end of their career, they'll be known as a troublemaker, and they'll be pushed out of the profession. So there's every disincentive on a complainant to come forward. And I think that advantage of that is taken by men who know that they can count on the silence of the victim.
So there's a hypocrisy at the heart of this.
I think the legal profession depends on its reputation and its reputation for ethics and high standards. And I think this is a moment of reckoning for the bar, because I think that senior members of the Bar Council have recognised that this has got to stop, or it will jeopardise the entire reputation of the bar, not just nationally, but internationally.
Would a Commissioner for Standards help, of the kind that, MPs are subjected to?
Certainly there does need to be changes in the system, and I will be proposing changes in my report, which will come out later in the year.
But root and branch reform is needed.
I think root and branch reform, I think it means systems change and culture change.
Should sexual relationships between trainees and more senior barristers be banned? Because they're strongly discouraged by the Bar Council, but not banned.
It's got to be remembered that young women who come forward to work at the bar, who come forward to be pupils, mini pupils, or do work experience, they are there to work. They are not there for the sexual gratification of older members of the chambers. And LinkedIn is a professional site for networking for professionals. It is not a dating app to be used by those predators who are trawling for sex.
Why do you think it is that the bar, of all places, seems to have such a problem?
Well, I think there are many reasons, and many of them are the strengths of the bar, but they contribute to enabling there to be dark corners for this terrible behaviour to carry on. I think it's adversarial, and sometimes that can be used as a cloak for bullying. I think that it's very hierarchical, and therefore there's a power imbalance. I think the Bar Council, in setting up this review, has recognised that things have got to change, that the law must be upheld and barristers must uphold the highest of standards, not just professional legal ability, but high ethics as well.
Baroness Harman, thank you very much.